Good afternoon, guys. Gals, nice to see you all. So welcome to our debate. Now, when the three of us sat down and said, hey, y'all, do y'all think, what do you think? The sole obligation of a firm is to create wealth for its shareholders at all costs. We all scratched our head and said, gosh, none of us quite think that. So what could we have a conversation about that really could tease out the nuance of this issue? And we changed a word. So the new motion, as we declare it, and I'm going to ask you to vote on this in a second, so listen up carefully, is the primary obligation of a firm is to create wealth for its shareholders at all costs. Now, if you think that is true, please right now raise your hands. Okay. Ryan, you're going to have a little work on this one.
Yeah.
Ryan's in trouble. Okay. If you think that is not true, if you disagree, raise your hands. All right, hands down. Now, here's the thing. At least half of you did not raise your hands at all. So in 20 minutes, we're going to give you another choice. We're going to give you another chance. You're going to determine the winner of our debate after this conversation. Today, we have here Ryan Carson. He's the founder and CEO of Treehouse. He is going to argue in favor of our motion. And arguing against our motion is Christine Herron from Intel Capital.
Boo.
Each of them gets 5 minutes. Then we will have a conversation. Then we will have a closing statement, and I will try to summarize it. And you'll vote again. With that, Ryan.
Sounds great. Nice to see you all. I'm a bit of a wanderer, so I'm not going to stay behind my little podium. It stresses me out. So first of all, I'm going to do another poll. Who here is a founder, CEO type person? Okay. Who here works for a company? And how many of you are investors? A few. Okay, got it. And how many of you have raised venture capital? Like a few. Okay, not many. Interesting. Okay, so I am going to argue the point that as soon as you take money from an investor, you are morally obligated to deliver shareholder value. That is a choice that you make, even if you don't like it. And I want to stress that that's an important choice because most of us start companies because we believe in fixing something, right? We believe it. But if you choose to take money, then you are obligated to return shareholder value. So what do you do? Well, I believe that you have to change the timeline that you think about. So if you're delivering shareholder value, often you're told, I need to do this in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years max. But the reality is you have to have the correct timeline that matches the solution to the problem you're solving. So this happened at Treehouse. So we were bootstrapped, we were profitable, and I started the company to empower people to get jobs. We teach people how to code, and I am extremely mission-driven. Then I decided to take venture capital, and at that moment I didn't truly realize that means I am now morally obligated to deliver shareholder value. So we had to work out a way where I explained to my investors, I'm going to deliver shareholder value to you, but it's going to take as long as it takes, right? So we have a decades-long view on this, that at Treehouse we help companies create talent, and it's going to take time to change the system, and I would like you to come along on that journey with me. So you must return shareholder value, but it's got to be over the correct timeline, and that has to be clear to your investors. So one example of this is that we've taught over 850,000 people how to code over the last 8 years. I'm very proud of that. But then I actually looked at the people that were coming out of Treehouse and realized that most of them are white males. So I'm not actually delivering on the promise that I started the company on. So we started to dig in, and we started to work with the Boys and Girls Club to source talent, and we started to place those folks as apprentices in companies. And so now we can actually help companies create diverse talent, and we can invest in people that aren't getting a chance, and that takes time. So delivering that value, it's taken us 8 years to figure that out, and now companies are coming to Treehouse and saying, we want you to help us create diverse talent and invest in talent, but that took time. It takes time to deliver that value. So have a long-term perspective, make sure your investors understand that you can deliver value and you will deliver value, but it'll take time.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Okay, so moving on to Christine, I will repeat the motion. She will be arguing against. The primary obligation of a firm is to create wealth for its shareholders at all costs.
Yes. Sounds very ruthless at all costs. I mean, I'm only ruthless in certain areas. I'm a Southern mom, so there's a little ruthlessness for that. So first I would want to push back as an investor on something that Ryan said, because I am a bit rebutting, which was that there was a moral obligation that he had to provide a financial return to his investors. And I actually don't believe that's the moral obligation. That's the business obligation. So that doesn't absolve a firm from having moral obligations, however, but it's important to understand which is which. And so you have your business obligations, which are around making money, around, sort of building something sustainable, and we were joking backstage a bit about you're in it, people are in it for the big bucks, not the quick bucks. Quick bucks, cut corners all you want. You're going to have, plenty of fun doing quick bucks that way, but you won't make the big bucks that way. So presuming you're doing big bucks and you're not cutting corners, thinking about moral obligations gets to how do you treat your employees? Do you have inclusive behaviors? Are you, putting products out into the world that hurt people knowingly? And then there's this weird gray area which sort of combines your business and moral obligations, which is legal and ethics. And some of the rules, some of them have rules and some of them don't. But, if you're going to be the kind of place people want to work, you probably have some ethics lying around. And so I would agree that if you're going to invest in diversity, that is a long-term game. It takes time to change ingrained cultures. But it also will kill some short-term wins about returns. And so, for example, I think most folks in the room have probably heard these stats about women make on average, 70 cents on the dollar, right? If you look at sort of for the same jobs. That actually carries over into investing. If you look at women and how people talk about, women-led companies actually produce a better return than a male-led company. Well, part of that might be because they had to be better to get funding in the first place, which is what most people assume. But a big piece of it is because it's an undervalued asset. It's just as true for investing in teams as it is for buying real estate. So if you have an undervalued asset and you get in cheaper, guess what? You're going to make more money when you exit that asset later. So I am, in theory, working against my own purpose to make money for Intel by going out and telling people to go invest in women and go invest in minorities and invest in military veterans and these other types of entrepreneurs that are undervalued by our current system, but they're building fabulous companies. And so if I create more competition for those deals, I'm going to have to pay more money. I'm an idiot. I shouldn't be doing this. But that's the world that I want to live in. And I'm fortunate that I work at a firm that wants that to be the world that it operates and does business in. So I don't believe that's the sole obligation is to make money, because if it did, our diversity initiative would be very, very quiet. There would be no announcements. We wouldn't tell anyone that we are trying to direct those dollars in that way. It would be like a secret R&D project. So the fact that it's public means exactly the opposite. We feel that as someone with a platform, we have an obligation to use that platform.
Right.
Okay. Are you ready to rest there?
Sure.
Oh, right. Let's get into it. I want to start with something that I heard a theme that I heard both of you hit on, which is the tension that exists between business obligation and moral obligation. I want to start with Ryan, then go to Christine. Do you think that it is possible for business obligation and moral obligation to be the same thing? Can you create a business where they are ostensibly the same?
Yes, I think you can create a business that is morally and business objectively aligned. And I can say that because that's what Treehouse does. I mean, we truly believe that by empowering and investing in people that aren't getting the opportunity to get jobs, it creates value for Treehouse, clearly, but it also is morally good. And I think the best companies are morally aligned with their business objective, and they're powerful. So that's the good side of that. You can do that. That's basically why I get up every day. That's why I go to work. So, yes.
But I suppose the challenge comes when they are no longer aligned,
right?
And you have to make the hard decisions.
I couldn't run a company where they weren't aligned. And I think as a founder, you have to decide: is this so important to me? Is the mission something I truly believe in that I will go to bat for, and I could eventually kind of die on the hill doing? If the answer is no, then don't do it. it won't work because you will be tested and asked to return shareholder value. And if it goes against your morals, you either have to be immoral or you have to not do it.
So Christine, you're out there investing, talking to lots of different types of companies. Do you see a lot of companies where the business obligation and the moral obligations are in fact directly in alignment?
Oh, mostly they're not, right? And it's not because they're opposed per se. It's just that if you have a company and your job is to make robots that can clean, so for example, great, interesting YC company that has a giant drone which goes up and cleans wind turbines, which is really freaking cool, by the way. But that company's moral obligation is not necessarily important, as entrepreneurs of that company. It's not relevant necessarily to their success in being able to get, a flying robot up to clean a wind turbine successfully and cost effectively. So I don't think it's always aligned. Now, you do have alignment like that in a lot of businesses now that are not necessarily double bottom line businesses, but they're very much like double bottom line businesses,
right.
Where, and that, if you haven't heard that term, it means that you have both a financial return you're going for and an impact that you're going for. So, your funders might not be double bottom line investors, but they certainly are aware of the impact he has. And like many nonprofits that are social in nature, if you are truly successful, you put yourself out of business. Right. Like if you have true parity in the workplace, you don't need folks to go out and make sure there's a path to employment and folks are getting trained that might not be in the workforce otherwise. You don't run a soup kitchen if everyone's got enough food already, right?
So I have a question then. So what if the right thing to do to deliver long-term shareholder value and the moral thing to do is long-term, and either investors aren't prepared to wait or the market's not prepared to wait for you to deliver that? I mean, I was talking to my friends last night. I'm like, I think it's going to take 10 years to change talent pipeline. That's a long time. So what do you do if...
Yeah. Well, I'd argue that goes back to everything else. So I used to work for Josh Koppelman at First Round. And this is the second time I'm quoting him this week, so it's pretty funny. So he had this metaphor he used, which was he'd meet a team, like the team, and say, you know what, but I can't go through with this investment because it's like I walked into someone else's kitchen, I love what they have in the fridge, and they're making a menu I'm not hungry for, right? I don't like what they're making. And so you want to have that expectation and that set of alignment. And so if someone comes to me and says, I'm building this business, here's my growth plan, I can look at that and I can make my own call on when that means an exit might be, when I'm going to get my return for my organization. And if someone comes to me and says it's going to take 10 years, that might be fine, but you want to have that honest conversation because there are investors who do think very long term. And then there are ones who have a shorter horizon. It's just about finding the right partners. So I think when people have very specific matches they need to make like that, you just need to make sure that's one of the top items of conversation before you decide to take someone's money.
Christine, when you were talking about initially about investing in women and people of color, you were saying that they're undervalued resources. And implicit in that is the fact that you're investing in them because they are valuable, because you believe that they will return value to the firm. So how is that not investing in them for the primary reason of creating value for the firm?
Right. Investing in them does create value for my firm. What does not create value for my firm is telling everyone else. I mean, if you invested in the stock market in any way, you have probably heard, some old cliches around information asymmetry.
Yes.
And how if you know something other people don't know, then you are going to make more money, right? So right now, I know with deep sets of data how undervalued these assets are. The fact that I tell other people means I am willingly giving up my information asymmetry, which is a stupid thing to do if I'm just about the money.
Right. Well, listen, so Ryan...
Yeah.
I heard what you said as, okay, it's the primary obligation of a firm to create wealth for its shareholders at all costs over any period of time far into the future that accomplishes that given my set of moral obligations.
Correct.
So how long are you talking about?
Well, I think it often takes...
This is like the little clause that gets you out of that.
I think it takes decades to solve big problems. Literally, huge amounts of time. And the problem is you can't really go to any Silicon Valley investor and say that. Like, no one will invest in you if you say it's going to take 10 years. And I don't know if you feel like you're outside of the valley sort of bubble. So I have a lot of
taking 10 years to make impact might be different from taking 10 years for you to be able to have some return value.
Yes.
Right? Because in theory, you could be big enough and have enough revenue to be acquired or to go public, or one of the many ways you return value back. Even if you haven't fully accomplished your mission, and even if the market is still an unfair market you can sell into.
Right. I guess I just think that we need to be thinking about solving big problems and having a longer term to do that, and then finding the appropriate investor to come along on that journey. And I just talked to so many people that are sort of default going to Sand Hill Road. I'm just going to go pitch, going to raise money, and I always say, well, what's your goal? Like, why did you actually start this? What is your timeline? And do you actually feel passionate and you want to run this business? Well, then you probably should maybe consider other types of investors. There's wealthy people, there's just so many types of capital, and it's not default Silicon Valley style.
Our motion is talking about the obligation of a firm to create value for its shareholders. And so when you think about that, I think about the traditional venture capital firm. Are you saying that actually, I'm hearing implicit in that if you go to Sand Hill Road, you knew it was a snake when you picked it up. You should know that what you're talking about is raising money.
Yeah, unfortunately. But the problem is most people don't know that, and they need the money, and they pick up the snake, right? So, but I want to hear your perspective on that as an investor, and if you think you're outside of that kind of thought bubble.
No, and we're talking about like taking money because it's the only money you can get. Is that
taking money because maybe it's the biggest check you can get, or maybe it's the check that comes with the promise of being Facebook, which actually maybe nobody wants to be anymore. I don't know.
Right. Well, I gotta tell you right now, no venture firm is going to make you Facebook. That just doesn't happen.
Amen.
It's the founders that do that. It's the company that does. It's not the investors. So as much as I think we're wonderful in value add, that's not us that does that for anybody.
Right.
Sure.
I actually have several companies that I work with, that I'm fortunate to work with, where I did not provide the term sheet with the highest valuation, right? But that entrepreneur was more interested in some of the other things around the investment, whether that was the structure of the deal, which gets some attention but not a lot, it should get more, or if it was the fact that they knew that someone else was going to be available sort of 9 to 4 weekdays, email only, and I was going to pick up the phone and they had my home phone number, right? Because if the servers are on fire at midnight, please call me. Like, don't wait. I want to know. So there's a lot of nuance to these relationships, and who do you want to work with, and what firm do you want to work with?
The way that the motion is framed, creating wealth is the end goal. And when I talk to founders in my reporting, creating businesses is the end goal, and creating wealth is among the benefits of creating a strong business. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious to hear from each of you, when you're out investing, what are you talking about? Creating wealth or creating business, or are they the same?
Mm-hmm. I'm so driven by our mission at Treehouse. I struggle to think outside of that, and sometimes I wish I was more sharkish or hawkish on this and maximize shareholder value more. But the truth is, I think the best businesses are mission driven, and they figure that out. So that's what my default is.
Yeah, and you're coming to my side. Just come stand right here. I'm making some space.
I know. I'm sorry. I can't help it. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I don't think anyone that would come to me and say, Christine, the thing that makes me get up every morning is to make you money. Like, if someone came to me with that, A, right? And then B, it would be very difficult for me to think that they're going to be passionate about solving a problem for someone, or about, the product they're trying to create, like just consumed with excitement about the thing they were creating. Like, that's who you want to write a check to. That's what's going to create wealth for Intel, or for me as a shareholder. So definitely I don't want creating wealth for the shareholders to be what makes the founders get up in the morning.
Okay, now we're going to move into the final, the end point of our debate. We're going to give each of our debaters 90 seconds to tell us a story, to persuade us of their point of view. We're going to start with Christine this time, because we started with Ryan first. Again, that's 90 seconds to give us a story that makes your point on your point of view.
Right. Or I was told I could talk about whatever I want, so I might actually make an ask of people in the audience. I'm going to I use my time. So I think that...
Spoken like a woman who thinks she's going to win, by the way.
So most folks here, if you have a lot of people here who are making product in some way, you know what I mean about getting up in the morning and you want to solve that problem, and you're going to create wealth for other folks, including your team, because they own shares in theory. That's just going to be a byproduct of what you're doing. Now, as you get bigger, and if you meet in the public market, that becomes much more important, much more scrutinized. But still, that's not what puts you up and gets you up and gets you in a chair. So one of the things that I would ask, and it's something we did last summer, is thinking about how do you invest, and I'm taking some of Ryan's business away, how do you invest in the next generation of folks around diversity, really? And so we did last summer, we took sophomore interns from a few historically black colleges and universities, gave them a job at Intel Capital for the summer. Their junior year, which is coming up, this is our first
20
course.
seconds.
And their junior year, they'll work at one of our tech companies. After they graduate, they can have a choice, and we'll find them a place. And we're going to do that every summer, and we're going to add into the diversity of the tech community. And if everyone just hired one person that wasn't like someone that looked just like them, that'd be amazing.
I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Okay, your 90 seconds,
90
Ryan.
seconds, great. So if you're thinking about starting a company or you're running a company, it's very important you go in with your eyes wide open about what the capital means that you raise, and you have to consider it very, very carefully. Raise the right capital, don't raise the quick capital, and pick the right investor. I have good investors that are long-term, thankfully, but it can go very bad. So think about that very hard. And the second thing I'm going to make an ask to, and this is just pure ask, is consider hiring underrepresented people of color and women and giving them a chance without a college degree. There is amazing, amazing talent out there. So just go look, and it's there.
All right. That was a debate that left everyone sort of on the same side. But now it's your turn, audience. And this time, no one's allowed to not vote, okay? So I'm going to read the motion, and then we're going to vote for, and then we'll vote against. So the motion is, the primary obligation of a firm is to create wealth for its shareholders at all costs. If you agree, raise your hand high.
Oh, I did a terrible job.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
You lost some.
Wow, that was bad.
If you disagree, raise your hand high.
Wow, good job, Christine.
Yay. All right. Thank you very much.
Argument.
And with that, I will triple the ask. Go out and search your communities and reach in the places that you may not have reached to find incredible talent. Thank
Amen.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all.